everyone. My name is David Jacobson, and you are watching PCARMARKET Live. Thank you for joining us as usual. Today we have a special day. Today we're going to talk about a car that seems to pull at the heartstrings of a lot of people, especially some of the younger generation in the Porsche world. But before we get to that, I want to introduce you once again to Jim Barry. Everyone knows Jim. And today we have a special guest, our very own. He's not only our creative director, he's also our resident guru on front engine cars and transaxle cars. And everyone meet Greg Coe.
Morning.
Hey, Greg.
How are you?
Thank you for coming early this morning from Brooklyn in the house. All right.
Coffee.
And it's coffee, yes. I can't drink my coffee, we know why. I'll be gagging for 20 minutes. Today we're going to talk about the 928. You know, while we were putting this together, we realized we were going to do the other transaxle cars, the 944, the 968 as well, but we realized that there really is enough to say about the 928. You know, when you talk about the development and its history and some of the interesting things about the car. So we figured we'd focus on that today. So if you're a 928 fan, you are definitely in for what we would hope you'd find the treat today.
Plus, they built it for a long time.
Well, you know, key number one.
Yeah.
Thanks for stealing my thunder. But yes, Jim, the most amazing thing to me, and a lot of you probably know this, but what's very interesting about the 928, if you really think about it, or if you never took the time to think about it, the car was built from 1978, Greg, to 1995.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's big years.
It's big years, but not only is it big years, I mean, as far as volume, I'm sure you mean the same thing that I'm thinking, which is, look what was built by Porsche in the 911 world between 78 and, you talk about Carreras, they just ended the SC, right? They came out with the Carrera. I'm sorry, the Carrera. The SC started in 78, excuse me. So 78, you had the SC, then you had the Carrera, and then you had the 964, and then the 993.
Yeah. If you put it in through another perspective, really development began on the car in earnest as early as 68.
Wow.
In 1971, which really means like that the 928, even though it was not debuted to the public until 1977, there was a 917, 935s, 914s, RS 911s, all that stuff was just coming out. And then towards the tail end, you've got the Boxster, the 959, the 996. Right. I mean, it's...
So that car was affected by some pretty iconic cars.
Yes.
And then it affected some iconic cars that came afterwards.
It was there. Which
is unbelievable. So that's part of what we want to talk about. But just for some people that may not be as knowledgeable on the 928 that are listening to this, 8-cylinder, first front engine car that Porsche made. Is that right? First front engine car. It was, and for those of you that know this, you always look back and you thank God that this didn't happen, but it was going to replace the 911, right?
That was the intention.
That was the intention. I mean, so the story goes. I mean, you've heard, some of you heard this before. That Peter Schutz, who was an American who was running Porsche at the time, was at that crossroads to either go with a plan to end the 911 production, or to continue the production. And as the story fable goes, is he actually drew a line on the wall with the timeline of all the cars that were being developed, and the 911 had a stop point. And he actually took a magic marker and went past that stop point and said the 911 will continue to be built. And I think when you look back, like Helmut Bott, who was the chief of engineering at the time, it was a celebration, and Porsche would not be surely what it is today if that had happened. We don't know what would have happened, but it would have been definitely a different history. But Greg, it was also a new platform. I mean, as much as it took from the cars before that, it was. So tell us a little bit about that. What was so different about that than the current 911 at the time?
Well, bolt by bolt, fresh, brand new. Everything from first bolt to last bolt, fresh, pure, new. Whereas the 911 that came before it was itself a derivative of the 356, which came from the Beetle. So you have all these wonderful chains in development, and then you have the 928, utterly, completely fresh. And really I mentioned, so as early as 68, 1971 is when the discussion really starts, because the United States is the biggest driver of sales.
Yeah.
The United States is thus a huge dictator of where the company is going to go for Porsche.
Yep.
And then rolling into the early 1970s, you have an energy crisis that's coming along. So Porsche has a bit of a conundrum. They're thinking, what is the future of motoring look like? What's the landscape going to look like in the world of tomorrow? Is the air-cooled platform going to be able to survive? It's not even a matter of oh, like the technical development had run its course. Forget that for a moment. Could we even build this car?
Yeah.
That was a question. Safety and emission standards are rolling out.
And they couldn't, because that's when Roof was doing things that Porsche couldn't do because of the emissions and because of the governing laws for manufacturers, not small builders. So it was an interesting time.
Really interesting time. So, it really, before Schultz came in, or Schutz, in the early 80s, you have Ernst Furman.
Yeah.
He's the managing director. He's the CEO. And he and Ferry were thinking, okay, let's develop something fresh. They get the project about 1971 is when it comes to, they figure it out, all right, let's do this. We're going to put a V8 motor in the front. We're going to put a transmission in the rear. Let's begin to develop it. So they have a bunch of test mules. Again, there's no Beetle to start from. There's no 356. There's nothing. They take an R107 chassis Mercedes.
Go figure.
To get started.
Yeah.
Put a V8 in there with a carburetor.
Wow.
And they tie it to a trans-axle unit, and they start to figure that out. That's technically the first 928. That's as far as a prototype is concerned. It's
and you had said something important, like about the market, driving Porsche's decisions to and what they're going to build. The Americans want bigger cars, more luxurious cars, and here Porsche was building this sports car, and the world was changing.
Yeah.
And if you looked at the cars that were on the road in America at the time, you'd understand why Porsche thought maybe a bigger touring car with a sporty appeal to it would be. Because I love the commercial that they had. I was watching some commercials in preparation for this, and it was like people were wondering why we built a luxury car with performance, but also they were wondering why we built a performance car with luxury. And the truth was, it was both of them. It was really trying to build that hybrid to really keep the Porsche name, and not much different than the Cayenne when it came later on, right? They wanted to keep us like the Macan. Is the Macan a smaller Cayenne, or is the Macan a bigger 911? Right?
It's a great question.
Well,
Macan's a great driver, by the way.
Yeah, and that's what they want you to. That's what they want you to think about Porsche. When you go back to that time, that's the same thing that Porsche was doing. They were thinking about how to appeal to the markets and so forth. But so it was a bigger car. It was a safer car. They did, however, which always puzzled me, they did fight putting the cup holder in them, Jim. Right? You being the big Mercedes guy, I'll never forget seeing these big Benzes and then no cup holders.
I don't get it.
They just would not. Is it the stubbornness? That they would not put cup holders in.
I guess you would probably know better than me. They probably just think you should be focused on driving and nothing else. Yeah.
Takes away from the driving experience.
But meanwhile, you're going to do it anyway, and then it's going to make a huge mess. And that's it.
You burn your leg. You got to go to the dry cleaner. Yeah. But it's just it always was. It was very puzzling. And then I'll never forget when they first put that cup holder. It was like it was like such a big deal with a cup. What was that's trivia. What was the first cup holder?
They stunk though. They were terrible. The early cup holders.
Well, listen. The Germans are incredible engineers, but there are certain things they're not great at, right? I mean, is air conditioning one of the things?
I remember in 2002 when the 745 came out, it had such a good cup holder, and I just couldn't. I used to go get this big Starbucks in 2002, the 745, and I used to go to Starbucks, get this big iced latte thing, and I used to just take turns and it wouldn't spill. I used to just show off. I used to show people, like, look what this cup holder is, because they were terrible. It was terrible. I still used to hold it in the earlier cars, but no good.
Well, you know what? You talk about that. So let's getting back to 928. One of the things that Greg, that you could probably attest to, really digging into these cars, is they were way over-engineered. When you even look at the storage armrest, you had to press a button to bring it out, then it came out. It was just very. But the craftsmanship, the assembly, the quality, the materials used was all Porsche, right?
You could, on one side of the coin, you could say that it's over-engineered. On another side, you could say that it's the engineering prowess. It's the abilities of everybody at Porsche, what they were able to do. This is completely fresh. And keep in mind what's going on at the time period. We're faced with an energy crisis.
Yeah.
And I got to give Ernst Furman, who's the director at the time, even though Peter Schutz gets all the credit for saving the 911, I think it actually comes back a little earlier. It takes a lot of money for research and development to develop a whole new model with nothing to start from.
Sure.
Nothing at all. But it's Ernst Furman that said, okay, we need to make sure through changing circumstances we have enough revenue coming in. So he's the one who signed into action. 911s hit all the motorsport tracks. So you got 935s on every racetrack, and people are falling in love with the 911. Every time they go to a racetrack, a 911 wins, gets big money to the bank, which, driving revenue, developing the 928 into this mega monolith, huge, epic thing. But little do they know, people are falling in love with the 911. I think,
Yeah. Well, sure.
we could talk about that a little later.
It's also like what Enzo said, or Ferrari. Someone at Ferrari, I think it was Enzo, said is that we race on Sunday to sell on Monday. Mm-hmm. That's really what it's about. Is that development on the track is what gives you the credibility and gives you the panache. Of if you're a winner, you're a winner. If you're a winner on the track, you're a winner in the showroom, and people always want to be part of that. So,
well, it's also interesting inside of a brand the segregation of loyalty to a model. Because like if you're a BMW guy, you're a BMW guy. If you're a Mercedes guy, you're a Mercedes guy.
Yeah.
If you're a Ferrari guy, you're a Ferrari guy. With Porsche, it's like there's transaxle people, there's 911. They don't usually mix. They don't spill. When you go into people's collections, you see people who are into these types of cars. You see people who are into 911s. You don't really see both.
I mean, look at us. We never had a 928 here on purpose anyway.
Exactly.
But I will tell you, in doing the research and getting a little bit of information for this morning,
scratching your head now. You're thinking.
I started to appreciate the car, and I do remember back years ago, I drove one. A friend of mine who was a Ford dealer ultimately became a Ford dealer. His dad and him owned an Isuzu store, if you can imagine.
God bless you.
Samurai.
Isuzu, you know how big they were in Japan, right?
Oh, not Suzuki. Isuzu.
Isuzu, yeah, big difference.
I used to like those rodeo trucks. They used to have the Amigo. It's a great truck. Yeah,
the Amigo.
Cool.
And then they came out with that futuristic car that I think was the end of them.
They had the Trooper, but they all rolled over. They got a bad reputation.
Yeah, the Trooper was. But you know what though? Trooper was almost like it had that upscale clientele, like like
it was a nice truck.
Range Rover did. But anyway, he had a 928. He brought it into. We were a Buick dealer as well at that time, and he brought the 928 in. It was such a special car. It really was. And my cousin, who is a big Porsche guy, it's all age. I think that. But then I go back, Greg, and I said it's age. It's mostly for the younger people. But the car was around since the late 70s, so it's not a young person's car. It was just the appeal of the 911. Like you're saying, Jim, is that the 911 people would not cross over to 928s.
It was a different car.
Because you can't say it came later in life and it's for a younger, like it came later for like the 944. It's a younger person's car, but it was around when the SC was around and the Carrera. So it's not a younger. It was around at the same time, but there is a delineation in interests between these transactional front engine cars and the 911.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to share with you a couple technical facts that I think you'd be really interested in, because when the car was introduced, it was supposed to be a sports car.
Yeah.
It was not a luxury touring car. It was a sports car. So I want to just share with you a couple quick things.
Yep.
The first year 928 and the first year 964. You would agree 964 is a proper sports car. 928. So the 928 comes out with 229 horsepower, 964 247.
Say that again.
229 on the 928.
Yep.
247 on the 964.
Okay.
Torque 268.
Yep.
911 228. 0 to 60 6.3 5.7.
What was 5.7? The
911. This is interesting though. This is where
there's
it
over
really
a decade
gets
between
interesting.
them. You're saying.
Yeah, there's over a decade between them. But this is where it really gets interesting, right? The length of a 928, right? It's known as being a frumpy, giant thing, right? The length of the 928 is 175 inches. The 964 is 167.
Wow.
8 inches bigger? That's not that much bigger. The width of the car.
What's the wheelbase though? Was the wheel? I wonder.
Wheelbase is 98 inches on the 928 and 89 on the 911. So it's a longer wheelbase, thus it's a better handling. But it's, this is especially interesting. The weight. The 928 when it came out, 3197. The 964, 3252.
Wow, so it was heavier.
By 50 pounds.
So it's interesting. So when you put that in perspective, you're like, oh, I guess it was supposed to be a replacement for the 911. The 911's a sports car.
Yeah.
So you have to replace a sports car with a sports car.
But as they aged, they got heavier, right?
Oh, they got real heavy.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't afford it. Nobody could afford such a developed thing.
Yeah.
The enthusiast, the regular, no way. So they completely marketed and rebranded the car as a vehicle intended for someone who fly helicopters from locations.
Talking about an identity crisis.
Yeah. So, and then you see the various varietals that come out later on. But those first cars were supposed to be sports cars.
Very interesting. That's very interesting. When I look at a 928, I always like the later ones better with the rear end and the GTS and just a more refined car. But when you start to look at it like I did and like you already know, the early 928s, were pretty special. And again, the clutch system was much more visceral, you know, with the was it the dual? It had the dual, what did I say?
Disc.
It had the dual disc, thank you.
Yep.
And then the later one had the single disc, but, you know, with that, it's like almost like, listen, it's like with the 911R.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they put the single mass flywheel instead of the dual mass flywheel to give it that more of that quirky, older feeling, right? Mm-hmm. And that was when they came out with the 928, that was real. That's the way the car was built, and that was that sports car feel, that visceral experience. Then you make it refined, and it makes people happy because you could power shift it. You know, you could shift like crazy. You can't do that in the early car, but that's the charm. I'll never forget when I bought my 911R. It's a little embarrassing, but I'll share it with you. I went to pick up. I was having a 1973 RS built in San Diego. It was at CPR, and Brian Dougherty was, God rest his soul, he passed away since, was building the car for me, and we went out and took a ride. And this is years and years and years ago. And I was driving the car, and I was always used to shifting a car quickly, you know? Mm-hmm. And he was sitting next to me, and I took out his Aubergine 73 RS. That was his car, because he said, this is what it's going to feel like. And as I'm driving, he's like, looking at me, slow down, he tells me. Why are you shifting like that? And it was a major wake-up call for me. You know, for those of you that are, a lot of the people that are like very experienced are going to completely get it and say, why'd you shift like that? But people that don't understand that first gear, clutch, 1, 2, second gear is fun and exciting. I was always, you got to do it fast. You got to shift it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And the clutch system does not work. Number one, it won't work when you do it fast. And number two is when you are in concert with the car's ability, it's that magical feeling that you're at.
Dance or something.
It's doing a dance that it's glorious. It really is. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Incredible. So when I was seeing that clutch system, the early one that had that, they said yes, it's more temperamental and it could. In fact, they even said you can hear it crack if you're not driving it the right way. You can hear it explode. You know, but you really have to know what you're doing. You can't just get behind the wheel. You have to really enjoy those cars.
So are you also saying on a 911 perspective, do you prefer like a 915, older 915 transmission?
Well, this was obviously, yeah. So the 915 was in the 73 RS, and then you have the G50, right, that came afterwards. Mm-hmm. To me, the G50 has that same beautiful, visceral experience. A little notchier, a little closer ratio, still beautiful. When you get into a 964, it's almost too smooth for me. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, first of all, the throws are shorter, but and I love it. Don't get me wrong. You know what it is when you're in something and then you get into something else, it's the sound, the feel, it all works together. Like when I get into a 964, it's an incredible car, the 964, but I find the shifting almost too smooth if I'm getting out of a G50.
It also has to do with
Does it make sense?
We talked about this yesterday, the power. I mean, if the car has a lot of power, the 915 is no good. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
So you mean the G50? I think if you have like a 3.6 or a 4-liter, 950. But in an earlier car, the 915 is like in an 8. I would take an SC over like an 86 Carrera.
Yeah.
I mean, because it's not much of a power difference, and you get that earlier feel.
I mean, listen, the 73 RS to me and many people around the world is the greatest Porsche ever built.
Car's amazing. Yeah.
When you got in that car, I will never forget your face when you got out of that car. When you hear the word somebody's jaw dropped. That was real jaw drop. I mean, he was speechless. That's a 915.
Yeah.
That's a 915.
That car's perfect.
But so you don't need more. That's the transmission that works. My point. That transmission worked with that motor and that perfect storm of a car. Anyway,
there's a lot of cars you drive that are expensive, and you say, why is it so expensive? That car, you understand.
Totally
right
get
away.
it.
Yeah, you understand why that costs a lot of money.
Yeah. It's like a Plymouth Horizon, right?
Of course.
Of course. It just works or it doesn't, right?
Dodge Omni.
What's that?
The Dodge Omni, by the way.
Dodge Omni,
I love that car.
So just to move on here. So the tranny with the rear weight was a 50-50, and 80% of these cars, I don't know if I mentioned it, were automatics, which is really why the manual is so coveted. I mean, it's very special. Okay, then you have what we talked about, the different of the manuals in the early and late cars. But also, Greg, something that was interesting, which you had mentioned, was the Ysac Axle. The Ysac Axle, so just explain what it was, and then we'll talk a little bit about, just briefly, of how important that was in the development of the 993 and how this stuff carried over. So the Ysac Axle in the 928.
Well, yeah, I mean, from very, very simple terms, you lift off on the accelerator in a 911, and the trailing arm pivots towards the rear, pivots inward towards the rear of the chassis with toe out, which destabilizes the car. So the car's going around a corner, whoop, goes into a tree.
So it had the ability to control the rear toe on compression.
Yeah, and that's what the 911
and rebound, which the stability was really incredible for a car like that.
And that first note, that was what the 911 was doing. They needed to repair that. So then now the trailing arm is able to self-adjust. So then the tires go toe in, and you're able to get around the corner super, not necessarily quicker, but with more efficiency without any disruption.
Right.
It's easier to handle.
Yep.
Easier to handle.
So the 928 has this Ysac axle. The 964, which was being built at the same time, had the banana trailing arms, right? Which was almost an antiquated system compared to what was in the 928 at the time. And then when the 993 came out, right? They furthered the capability of the Ysac axle with the kinematic toe, which is kind of almost duplicated like a four-wheel steering type situation. But so the development, we talked about this before, the development of the 928, because it spanned so long, was affected by what happened before it, and then it really affected the 993. And that to me is very, very fascinating. So that car had a tremendous effect and a reverberating, presence years later.
Yeah, it's, there's a few notes here. What are the takeaways? The 928 is an exceptional car, technically. The harmony between models within the factory, there's harmony. It's family. And then it also speaks, the 993 is like the greatest 911. It's just what it is. By that point, by the time it comes out,
those are fighting words.
Well, from a technical merit perspective.
That's very, very funny. So let's talk about something interesting also, just getting away from the technical part of it, because this is inside the market, right? And why are 928s, why have they not reached the levels of collectability that a lot of the 911s have? I mean, even the GTS, which we were trying to find accurate numbers is like trying to pull teeth, but we figure in doing some research, there was about 407 GTSs in the U.S., and maybe it was 129-ish. There was not a whole lot of the 5-speeds. There was like a handful of manuals. But if this was a 911...
Yeah, I have that note here. Hold on. For the GTS?
Yeah, the GTS. So it was 407 U.S. cars.
128.
128. Oh, so I was almost there. 128 manuals. 128 GTS manuals, which was really the epitome of the road-going 928. That was their pinnacle developed car, and there was only 128 sticks. They're selling anywhere from, depending on the car, between 50 grand to
sometimes 40
grand.
Sometimes.
Yeah, to 150, let's say.
Yeah.
Why is that car not $500,000? Now, listen, when you look at the Barrett Jackson for the one of the things about this car, and I don't want to bounce around here, but it's a cultural icon, and that's regardless of the fact that it's not reaching these levels of collectability, money-wise anyway, of a 911. The car is a huge cultural icon, right? With, what's the name of that movie again?
Risky Business.
Risky Business. And that car sold for $2 million at Barrett Jackson for the car that was in the movie, but...
Yeah, that you throw out the window.
Yeah, you throw it out the window.
But someone's underwear that was in the movie, and what does that mean?
Well, they said that he learned how to drive a stick in that car. Blah blah. Blah. That was the actual.
So then that means the clutch is strapped.
Clutch is destroyed.
Yeah, that's true. And it was a 79, right? I think.
79.
So wow, so that clutch is destroyed.
Yeah, it's toast.
All right, so hopefully you got a new clutch with that. $2 million. We'll throw in a new clutch, But I just want to understand from your perspective, both of you, actually, is why is the GTS specifically and the 928s have not gone up in value like the rest of the Porsche world?
Not as substantial. I mean, if I could start, I think it begins because, as Porsche's developing the 928, they're racing 911s, and 911s are winning, and 911s are everywhere, and they're selling. People are falling in love with the 911. They don't know that a 928 exists. Then when the 928 comes out as a replacement, again, there's a lot of changes and whatnot, but the love, the passion for the 911 already started. So it's sort of, you know.
And you almost ruined it, 928.
Yeah.
You almost ruined the 911. So it's almost
the consumers, they were not interested in a divorce. They had fallen madly in love, and that was that. That was destiny. They were honeymoons for decades later. So I think it really, to me, it starts with that. As its effect on design, you know, the 928 is a technical design.
Oh, it's beautiful.
It's a great thing, and I think personally it's beautiful from like an external perspective. But if we were to go to the MoMA, the Modern Museum of Art in New York, 53rd Street, there's a 1965 911 in there. There's no 928 in there. There's a reason for that. I mean, the seminal effect that the 911 had on all cars.
Yeah.
All cars.
Yeah.
You know, and stuff that we see.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't even match it.
When you look at the Taycan, you could see a 928, can't you? If you look really hard, it's amazing. Porsche's amazing to do that. But that's a very good perspective. You know, the love affair and that and the other thing you said very important, which I think is a major key, is what you said about racing, is that, like I said, the passion of the people with those victories on the track. And how that just culminated into these groups of collectors, and it festered. You know, Jim, what's your take on the values?
Well, you can never say for certain because the song isn't over yet, right? Like sometimes things just take a while to wake up. It's you know what I mean? Like look, all of a sudden, you know, I've seen a couple of Ferrari Mondials sell for some money, and those people hated those cars, right? So you never know. But they're not cheap. They're not like $5,000 cars, so they have some value.
That's true. That's true.
And to me, it's either they just haven't caught on yet, or people just aren't going to love them as much as like my personal and my very limited world as a kid, as a car enthusiast. I don't know why these never stood out to me. Maybe it's because, you know, the only ones that were in my neighborhood were like the 911s were in garages under covers, and they were cherished. And I remember one of these on my street. It was parked outside. The paint was like a piece of garbage. You know what I mean? So it never spoke to me because that was like my first. I remember the first one I've seen. You know what I mean? As a kid.
I can see those cars sitting on the side of the road, you know, getting dirty.
I remember I went to school with a kid. His mother had a beautiful diesel S-Class, like an 86 or 87 diesel S-Class in like that yellow color. I loved it. And his father had a 944. And I remember he bought a Jeep and left the 944 under the tree because the car he had problems with it every week. And the car just sat in front of his house for 3 years till they finally, you know, took it away. So like that was like my experience of the front engine Porsches, and like that would never happen with 911s.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like everyone was crazy over them. So you know, it may just take some time for people. And now that the cars have value, also that's another thing too, right? We saw it yesterday with the V12 Mercedes. If a car's worth $5,000 and it costs $30,000 to fix it and restore it, no one's doing it.
This is true.
But if these cars start showing some value, people will put money into them and revive them. So you know, that's kind of my take on it.
I don't know. I sit with this, and it is, and we also have to remember that it's all relative. We call these cars cheaper, but they're not cheap. Like let's take a look at this. For instance, John, I'm going to show this on the screen here. This is a recent auction on PCAR. It's a 91 928 GT 5-speed, and the car sells for just about $50,000. Now,
how long ago was this? By this point.
It was in December.
This was in December.
Yeah. So it wasn't very recent, but it wasn't a long time ago. A couple months ago.
But look how beautiful this car is. But the thing is to note is that this car is not cheap.
These are the ones that speak to me. By the way.
What was this car new?
A lot of money. It would have been probably in 1991. Maybe you're looking at $80,000 to $100,000.
Wow.
Is that right?
Something like that. We could fact check that afterwards. But this one's cool too. This one is all GTs are manual only.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Big 5-liter motor.
Love that interior.
By this point, good compression, shorter torque tube, big brakes. I mean, this was a very advanced machine. This was really, really good. I mean, in the spirit of evolution, that is Porsche. I mean, this is a really good example of that. Yeah, whoever got this got a great vehicle.
Maybe this will spark some interest in people in these 928s because they're beautiful to look at. They drive nice. They're very comfortable. And you know what? I'll tell you something else interesting that I really believe. You know, when you look at 356s today, You look at the values have kind of stabilized, dropped a little bit. They're not enjoying the same. We talked about this like last week. Even maybe early 911s, Greg. You know, they're not going crazy. I think it's because as people get older, we talked about this, Tiptronics. I call them automatics now. It gives you more value, right? Tiptronic is an automatic. Some people don't want it with the PDKs out. People are saying, I could drive a Porsche without shifting gears and enjoy the drive, enjoy the sporty feel of it. And these cars now are they're comfortable. It is a Porsche. My prediction is, I'll put it here, these cars are going to continue to rise in price. The nice cars, the ones that are well sorted, are going to be very good investments.
I don't disagree.
I'm not saying that these cars are going to go flying up. This car's not going to be a $300,000 car.
We will see a correction.
But this car's not going down. When the correction is there and things go down, this car at $50,000 is going to be a solid investment. It's going to go up. It's going to go up. So, that's one guy's opinion over here, and that's why I think that these are very, very good cars. Here's another one to take a look at over here, okay? Here is a 18,000-mile 928 GTS.
This was another good buy. This is
this is an older comp, but
this is an older comp, but we're just trying to show here $120,000 for for a car. How many? Again, 54 U.S. cars. 54 U.S. cars. Come on. And then you get a car with this, with 18,000 miles in this condition, $120,000. How much is this car going to be worth? I'm going to tell you right now, this car can easily hit a 150, 200 to 2.25 over the next 5 years, depending on how the world goes. But I think this car is a very good investment at this price. I really do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think whomever bought that a year and a half ago, whenever this was, this was a good price then. It's still a good price now, and yeah, this is a very attractive buy. When it comes time that they decide we're going to move it to the next owner, they're going to be delighted. 50%, 100% returns.
What a beautiful car.
Really pretty, and that is the fully evolved. That's the best of the best. 5.4 liter motor, 300 some odd horsepower, 350, 380, I think pounds of torque, something like that. Big, and then the 5-speed is wonderful.
I agree.
Go to the interior, which is really interesting as well. There's been a discussion recently now that with Porsche, with the Panamera, with the Taycan, with Macan, Cayenne. 911s, air-cooled 911s. Yeah, leave that photo there for a moment.
Okay.
With the air-cooled cars, there was no torque tube per se. There was, it was a nice flat floor.
Right.
When this car came out in '77, debuted. This was the first time there was ever in a center console. They never figured out. They never thought of that before. They never had a reason for that. If you look at any modern vehicle that Porsche is producing today, that's the interior.
Yeah.
It's that interior right there. It's the same sloping angle. The same beautiful form meets function.
I'm having a transformation.
Yeah.
I am in love with this car.
And David, the best thing about it?
I love the seats.
Naturally aspirated.
Naturally aspirated 8-cylinder. 5.4 liter?
On this one, 5.4.
Yeah, the GTS.
4.5 to begin, up to 5.4 on this.
Really, by the way, this whole console moves, right? When you tilt the wheel, this entire part moves up and down. And this is what I was saying to you before about this over here. I forgot what it was. I'm going to pop it up. There was this one giant button here. It does something very silly. But the refinement of this interior, look at these sports seats. It almost has like a 959 type seat in it, but yet modern, but not too modern. Beautiful car. Beautiful, beautiful car. Anyway, and then we have... we just put this in here, Greg, because you had sent this to me. This was a while ago, but we wanted to show people. This is a 928 prototype. It was a Club Sport coupe. Tell us about this.
So that's the prototype of the next year they came out with a production Club Sport, but they are limited cars. They're really limited cars. This one is a back to basics. It's a return to form. It's an attempt to try to, in this sort of 10 years later on, the car came out in '78, so by 1988 they have a limited run of Club Sport cars. They're trying to return to what the cars were supposed to be. Yeah, that's a slow website.
Slow, yeah. It's an old one.
Old auction house, old website. But there it is. So we're talking single mirrors, no sunroofs, no air conditioning, small wiring harnesses, wiring looms, I should say, cloth seats. Everything that you would expect out of a Club Sport. Heavy-duty suspension, Club Sport wheels, light. Yeah. So it was really a form, a return to that. I bring this up. It's a total outlier It's a total oddity
It's also
and a weird thing.
Derek Bell's
it's Derek
car.
Bell's personal car. It's a total outlier, but we bring it up merely to show that there's actually a lot of 928 models out there. We have to remember that. We're looking at 15, 18 years worth of car. There's a lot of different things. So if you're looking for one of these cars, there's actually a lot to find.
There's a lot to find.
If this is your price bracket, all the more power to you. Find one of these things if you can find one and grab one. An early car, narrow-bodied car, an automatic, a 5-speed, a Jubilee edition, a Ysac edition. There's all these different offerings for you.
Yeah.
There's so much.
Yep. And I'm going to go here to the I don't know. Yeah. So this was the car that sold Tom Cruise in the movie Risky Business. This was the car.
And I think this one is the reason why it sold for this amount of money is because in the movie he spins around in Chicago and he does like a whole song and dance in the car, and he comes to a full stop and he looks over to his friend and he goes, "There is no substitute, Porsche."
That's right. That's right.
And I'm fairly certain it's in this car, and that's why this one's like, this is the car, because they had another one that they dumped into the lake and things like that. So.
Oh yeah, I forgot it wound up in the lake. So
that's not
that's even
this
worse.
one.
No. That car actually, Jim, in the defense of the car, was no engine. It was just a shell. I thought you were
going to say it's still in the lake and you visited it.
No, it was just a shell. And John, you could pop this up because this is just really this just shows the beauty of the car. We'll just take a quick look at this.
Our journey started 45 years ago. 8 cylinders, 90 degrees from one another, in the form of a V. It was love at first sight. Lightweight alloy at the heart. You made the Porsche 928 an icon. Then the Cayenne.
So I think we're gonna leave it there. What do you think, guys?
Yeah.
All right, we can go on forever with this iconic car. I have definitely grown to appreciate, it's like anything else in life, right? When you start learning more about it and you dive in, you start to appreciate it. This is a very special car at a very special time. It affected a lot of amazing cars that Porsche ultimately created and used a lot of what they learned during this span of building the 928. So maybe we'll have one in our collection one day.
One note, if I didn't mention it earlier, I think I totally forgot. The car debuted in 1977. It's 2022. It's 45 years old.
77, yeah.
45th anniversary this year.
Wow.
Should have had a cake.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, 928.
That's very special. Greg, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for coming in. As always, Jim, thank you. And also thank you, everyone. I know you have a lot of things to do with your time, and spending it with us is really greatly appreciated. A couple things we have coming up. April 23rd, Torrance, California, PCARMARKET. We have an office there now, and we're going to be doing a Cars and Coffee. If you're in the sound of my voice, tell everyone who's within driving distance to come out and meet us. I think it's on a Saturday? Mm-hmm. Saturday, April 23rd, Torrance, California. It's going to be a great day. We're going to have some raffles and some shirt giveaways, and we're going to have an amazing donut truck. Coffee's on us. You're going to get an Eventbrite. It'll be on our website, an Eventbrite, to just register that you're going to be there. Check out our auto tiles. Our newsletter is going to be popping in again, Auto Focus, which is going to talk about the industry, what's happening. PCARMARKET Live. Check out all of our shows and our things happening there. And PCARMARKET, the auction will have ended by now, but today, when this is going to go live, we will just have ended our M Madness. But we do have some great Lamborghinis. If you go on there right now, some really cool Lamborghinis. What the heck was that I saw? I'm sorry, we're going to say goodbye here, but I'm going to tell you,
It was a Lucid commercial.
What?
It was a Lucid commercial.
You being a wise guy?
I was looking at it.
No, it wasn't a Lucid commercial.
I just saw a Lucid commercial.
No, not that. I'm talking about this car right here.
Oh.
This car right here. What the heck is this?
It's a mirror edition.
I didn't even know this car existed.
It's only a few.
Greg, how cool is that?
I love it. I love the gold on the bottom.
Did you know this car existed?
Yeah.
LP700.
I'm sorry. This is I love the Miura. To me, the Miura was the first.
Well, good news, it's for sale.
The first supercar ever made was the Miura. They say, right? First
No
supercar
bids.
ever made. What's that?
No bids. Put in $500.
Put in a $500 bid. It just went live really last night. But anyway, point is some special stuff on there right now. So get to PCARMARKET and check out what's going on. Have a great day. Thank you again.